tonight on the PowerScripting podcast, we are very pleased to welcome back to the show Jeffrey Snover. Jeffrey, welcome back.
Howdy. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Exceedingly well, because it's a podcast night and we've got Jeffrey Snover on. So, you know, that's plenty. But that's not enough, because we do have another person from Microsoft with us, John Slack. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm John Slack. I'm a PM on the PowerShell team, and I've been working on PowerShell Git and the PowerShell Gallery.
Okay, and we will explain why these things are important here in a little bit, because they are super important. But first, John, since it's your first time, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into IT, and what led you to Microsoft and in the role that you're working on today?
That's an interesting question. So I am actually fresh out of college. I went to Rice University in Houston, and I actually, oddly enough, applied to Microsoft as a tester on low-level software because I was an electrical engineering major. Believe it or not, and they actually interviewed me as a PM on the PowerShell team, which I was not prepared for at all, but it's worked out really well thus far. I did an internship with the PowerShell team, really liked it, and they offered me a position back on the team. And so here I am, a year later.
I am surprised. I didn't actually know this. So what were your skills and qualifications relative to the job you applied for, compared to what you thought that you were getting into before you knew what the hell, a PM on the PowerShell team would be?
I was probably better qualified for the job I applied for, but I mentioned in my application that I really liked interacting with people and building high-level solutions as well as the low-level stuff, and so I think that they picked up on that and said, hey, this guy's actually a good fit for being a PM, which, I mean, prior to being interviewed, I didn't even know that the PM position really existed. It was this little checkbox on the form that I kind of ignored.
So, you've been doing it for a year now.
Yep.
Now, and did you know what PowerShell was before starting?
I knew what it was because I had done my internship on the team. So yes, I had some knowledge from the internship, and I also bought Bruce's book before I started full-time and read through some of that.
Well, that was probably
I made an effort to get up to speed.
That must have been about the coolest
running.
interning gig ever.
It was a fun time. It was I was very surprised by how well it worked out.
Did you read the Monad Manifesto before you joined?
Yes, I did as well.
Okay, pass the IQ test.
I read it during my internship as well as before I joined.
So now you're a PM. But what does that mean at Microsoft, and what are the projects that you've got? We'll go through those again, and then we'll kind of we may skip back and go to Jeffrey here for a minute, but I'll see how that works out. But tell us more about what your job entails.
Yeah, so what my job entails. The PM role is kind of interesting. It's mostly defining user-facing experience is kind of how I think about it. So if the user interacts with it, the PM kind of owns that element of what you're designing. So I do a lot of functional specking, so defining what it is, how the user interacts with it. And truthfully, there's also a lot of meetings involved. And it's interesting because you're a lot higher. You get to dive into the implementation and work with the developers directly, who are actually doing most of the coding. But you also are slightly removed from that, if you so choose. So you can kind of dive in if you want to, or pull out and kind of take a higher level view. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. So you are. Did you have software engineering expertise, or QA? Because that was kind of where the job you're going for.
Yeah, so in school, like I said, I was an electrical engineer, and I was actually studying mostly systems and signals type stuff, which is just a lot of math, Fourier transform, wavelets, and whatnot. But I took a lot of software engineering courses on the side just because I enjoyed them, and it was based off of that skill set that I applied to Microsoft.
Okay. Well, I think it's worked out great so far.
I hope so.
I mean, you got some pretty cool projects. So let's do this. So, Jeffrey, how's it going?
Groovy, crazy actually.
So
it's never
crazy,
been
why?
more crazy. Just so much is going on. You know, I mean, it's like the people just poured jet fuel on the PowerShell fire.
In a good way.
Crazy. Absolutely great way. Yeah, just the desired state configuration is taken off like a rocket. So many people are interested in that. There's so many cool things going on, and then we're releasing at a crazy pace. We just got on this agile bandwagon, and man, we just got a ton of things going on.
So when did version 4 ship? Do you know that off the top of your head, roughly?
No.
I don't either. I'll have to look it up. So let's make up and say that it was a year ago.
It was about August a year ago.
Okay, so
because that's right when I joined.
And then you guys shipped WMF5 preview 1. What, in the spring? It was a while back. That first drop, wasn't it?
Okay.
Then you've had 4 more releases since then.
I think so. Lots. So, some of those are previews, and some of them are CTPs.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. So you have a different level.
That difference?
Well, why don't you state it right now, so we will be very clear.
The CTPs are like the experimental releases, like tread carefully. But the preview releases are actually okay to use in production. However, they're kind of fixed forward model. So they're supported by the product team, and then if you have a problem, we'll fix it in the next release of the preview. So
and in these latest releases, what do we expect as far as the the level of quality in terms of production ready and the types of bugs that one would expect to see? Because we had Steve Morawski on quite some time ago when he was at Stack Overflow talking about DSC for the first time on this show, and he had been using it in production. So we knew that people were doing it in that sense. But
yeah, no, that's exactly it. We have a bar that is, for the preview releases, it's the production bar. Now, obviously, it's not the same as when we did the 3-year release and spent the last year baking it and testing it. But we do have very good test automation, so we're pretty confident that we're not introducing any regressions. And yeah, it's you can go into production with the preview releases.
So that's interesting. So was the testing then on a 3-year release cycle? Was the testing significantly less automated?
Nope, but we had more. We gave it to our customers. Kind of like front-loaded, right? Well, it was that you gave it to your customers, and your customers tried it out in every single variation. Obviously, that's not the same case here. We did a build, and then we went through our quality process, and we might have given it to some MVPs a little bit earlier, but it's basically coming to you from our build. In the DevOps community, they have this notion, and we're trying to get to it. It's basically a notion called ship on green, which is to say you do a build, and that starts a process, and when that process says green, you just ship it. Don't think about it, just ship it.
And as I understand it, and this is something that I'm kind of learning all the time, but from what I've read and what I've heard about people's experiences in DevOps in continuous integration, is that the reason that this works is that the frequent iteration is shown to improve quality, not decrease quality.
Yeah, that's right. It's like riding a bicycle, right? You know, you're not more stable when you go slower.
Yeah, but also if you're already used to the processes and of maintaining that high velocity, that when you need to implement a fix, you can get it out quickly. So maybe there is a bug, but that bug is squashed very quickly.
Yep, that's an important thing to note. You know, as we do this more agile thing, the number of instances, things that leak through, you'll see that. But the whole point is you're not going to have to wait 3 years to get a fix.
Right. So, where we are with WMF5, I think there was just a November drop, right? Very, very. Let's see. I'm just scanning the blog posts here. Yep, 2 days ago.
2 days.
Yeah, 2 days ago. So, which is awesome.
Yes, indeed.
Let's see, and then okay. So we've got. I'm just looking at the blog on the PowerShell blog, which we'll put links in the show notes for folks. There is the November 5th, November drop. Let's see. I'm going to read some bullet points from it. You'll find improvements in OneGet, PowerShell Get, PowerShell DSC, classes for PowerShell, and debugging in PowerShell. And we'll drill down into into these a little bit. All this is good stuff. But first, let me go back to John. And John, why don't you remind us which of these things that you touched? Because I want to give you the opportunity to give us the treatment on them.
So I have touched PowerShell Get most significantly. That's been what I've been working on basically the past year, which is a package manager for PowerShell content, and also the PowerShell gallery that will show up there that works with PowerShell Get. And I've also been involved with OneGet tangentially, because PowerShell Get and OneGet work pretty closely together. They're pretty tightly integrated.
So I'm trying to remember who all we've had on when and what related to these. We've had a few people, but nobody from Microsoft that I recall. So I think it was, when Kirk Monroe came on the show, he was talking about some of these features. But so John, you're going to be the first to spread the official word here. So why don't you kind of lay us out, the intent for PowerShell Get and where you are in the November build.
So the intent for PowerShell Get is to have a package manager for Windows PowerShell, basically making it really easy for you guys to discover, install, update, publish, share PowerShell content, both publicly, so that you can share with the broader PowerShell community as well as within your enterprise.
And so is it fair to say, or is it too different to say that this is like what we've seen on Linux from a way back, apt-get and yum and all those guys?
So it's similar. I would actually more liken PowerShell Get to Ruby gems or CPAN or PyPy, or there's a whole number of kind of language-specific repositories. I would more liken OneGet or Chocolatey to apt-get, personally.
And that'll be a different show, I'm sure, because we do want to get Garrett and Rob on talk about OneGet and Chocolatey. We actually don't. I haven't picked a date, but we'll be doing that. So I don't want to steal too much of their thunder, but it will be. So with that that background, okay. So PowerShell Get is for easily installing PowerShell content, modules in particular, right?
Yep. We share PowerShell modules.
So tell us about the user experience and some of the most important commandlets and kind of the workflow involved, and the high level functionality.
Yeah. So PowerShell Get, I would say the user experience is fairly simple. If you want to find modules from an online repository, you use find module, and you can search by tag, by name. In the latest WMF, we added the ability to search by DSC resource or command within the module. Once you've found the module you'd like to install, it's as simple as saying install module with the name, It'll go suck it down, it'll put it in the correct directory. You no longer have to deal with telling your coworkers, hey, you want to download this, and then you want to unzip the folder in this Documents Windows PowerShell folder / modules that doesn't exist yet, but you should make it. And then if you have any issues, let me know. That's kind of a pain. So install module really simplifies that process. When users update their modules, so when the publisher updates their module, instead of having to go and find the update and see on some blog that the module got updated, instead you just type update module, and it'll go and it'll update all of the modules you've installed onto your system. And then finally, publish module makes the process of actually publishing the module really simple. So instead of having to package it up in a weird way and add metadata in some online form, what we do is we take the module, we take the metadata that is in your module manifest, and then we use that metadata to actually automatically publish it. So all you have to do is use the publish module commandlet with the correct name to publish it on up to the gallery. So I'd say those are the key 4 commands in PowerShell Git. So
I haven't loaded the November build yet. I was just trying to do so, and I was foiled with a restart requirement. So I'm going to have to skip that one this time. But what I recall of using it thus far has been really good in the sense of, it's just easy. The friction involved to install something, say, PowerShell community extensions, for example. It's install module, PSCX, done. I can't think of anything else I really want or need from it. I mean, is there more yet to come, or is this part of what Microsoft is doing? Is it finished?
So I can't commit to adding anything in the future. There are definitely things I want to add. I'll put it to you that way. For instance, sorry, go on.
By the way, I did say
stuff.
I did put in the chat room. Hold on, John, before you continue, I want to let you know what I said in the chat room a few minutes ago. At the end of this interview, we all get to give a thumbs up or thumbs down, and that determines John's future at Microsoft. So no pressure. Go ahead.
The interpretive dance portion represents 80% of the vote, so you have to describe your feature fully using an interpretive dance.
Okay.
I know that there are things that that you can't say because this is a public forum, and so it's cool if I accidentally put you on the spot. It was an accident. But if Jeffrey says it, then you can say it.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're thinking about right now is kind of how do you determine the quality of what you find in an online gallery? So there's a lot of, I'm sure everybody's aware, there's a lot of crap that's out there. And so what we're kind of thinking about is how do you intuit or discover the quality of modules you find in the gallery? Is it, do they have pester tests? Do they have documentation? Can you read the documentation? That sort of stuff is going to, I think, play a bigger role going forward, as well as perhaps some automated bar for getting your stuff in the gallery.
That sounds like
guidelines, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm speaking off the cuff here.
Explain guidelines.
It's quite all right.
I mean, we've had commandlet guidelines for a while, or for a long time, and so just things you should do in order to publish to the gallery are what I would call guidelines. Jeffrey, I'm not sure explicitly what you're getting at here.
So basically the idea is that we're looking at, and now, just to be clear, we're talking about things we're considering, and you should not don't think of this as a promise, but basically we're looking at some ability to analyze the scripts using the AST, and then apply a set of rules, some of the best practices that, both we and the community have decided on, and then basically have those codified so that when you say, I'd like to publish this module, it'll say, no, your code's crap. Fix your code. We're not going to allow that to be published. And then also, if there's some way you figure out a way to get around our publishing, when you do a get, we'll also enforce those rules and say, yeah, I'm not going to give you that code because it's crap. If you want to, you can say mine is forced, but then you're taking it on your own. And then lastly, the idea that says, well, you might want to add your own rules when you do a get. So, for instance, one of the most dangerous things in PowerShell, of course, is invoke expression. So you might want to say, hey, I'm not going to download anything that doesn't invoke expression, or I want to look at that code before I accept it.
Awesome. So that's exactly right.
Yeah, the heart of it is that we're trying to figure out how to make it easy for you to trust code on your system. And not go out and start sharing stuff and then get burned by it and say, yeah, it didn't really work for us.
So why don't you talk about the relationship to PowerShell, of PowerShell Gallery to the PowerShell Get module and its functionality?
All right. So PowerShell Get is the set of commands that I just listed, plus a few others. Excuse me. That's designed to work with online repositories to find, discover, install, update, all of those things I mentioned against online repositories. The PowerShell Gallery is the Microsoft public repository that we're setting up right now. You can find it on at PowerShellGallery.com. And it's, just to get a little bit into what it looks like, it's actually based off of NuGet, if you're familiar with NuGet. And it is the place where we are publishing our modules, and we're encouraging the community to publish their modules. By default, PowerShell Get operates against the PowerShell Gallery. So when you run find module the first time, you're getting content from the gallery. So they're paired together, but you can use PowerShell Get to interact with a bunch of other galleries if you want to set them up, like within your enterprise or something like that.
So if you can set up a NuGet service, then you can publish modules and upload and download modules using PowerShell Get.
Yeah, so we've made an effort not to modify the NuGet server side of things in terms of the protocol. So if you set up your own NuGet server, you can use PowerShell Get against it. And we're actually working with the NuGet team to see if there's ways we can improve that relationship moving forward.
Awesome. So, and I think we may have linked to this before, ways to set up NuGet servers. And if I can find a link, I will put that in the show notes. But PowerShellGallery.com is the one that everybody needs to know. That's Microsoft's official repository. Now there are a lot of all of your DSC waves are up there, but there is community stuff as well. So tell us what the expectations are for what you guys are going to have in there. Is it going to be pretty wide open?
So right now, publishing is limited to a whitelist for the time being. We're basically limiting publishing to people we trust to contribute high-quality stuff. As time goes on, especially now that we've said, hey, here's the URL, go there. I think you're gonna see it open up more and more and see more and more contributors. If there's anything you want to see in the gallery, just shoot a mail to cgadmin@microsoft.com, and we'll look into getting more content up there. In the fullness of time, our vision is to have it wide open, just like NuGet.org is, where anybody can contribute after signing up. But that is the fullness of time.
And after they pass the quality bars.
Yes, the quality bars are a key part of that, because we don't want to open it up for you don't want to open it up and then say, hey, here's this bar you have to pass, and then somebody says, hey, I've been publishing and now I can't publish because of this quality bar. What's up with that? So we need to get that story straight before we open it up to the public.
All right, that is awesome. Yeah, I'm just so pleased with how simple it is and how easy it is to to install a module. And the gallery is basically just exposing all of the metadata that the packages have with them. And I see there's also download count, so it looks like you'll be able to get do some measure of popularity or sorting to help with discoverability, I guess.
Yep. And that improving discoverability is an important thing moving forward. Like I mentioned in the November release, we've given the capability to search by DSC resource or by command. Now, disclaimer, it's only search by DSC resource for modules that have been published with the latest preview. So not very many modules in the gallery currently have that set of metadata, but moving forward, I think you're going to see more and more metadata show up in the gallery, so you get a better idea of what's in the module and what the module is about.
So how does it work with DSC? You'd mentioned that you have tags, and I see a DSC tag in here with lots of DSC resources in them. Is there something that is automatic that will handle that categorization, or does that rely on someone tagging their DSC resources with a DSC tag at publish time?
So up until this point, it's been reliant on manual action. But in the November preview, we've started automatically adding tags if we detect something. So I think if you're publishing a module now with DSC resources within it, we will automatically add the DSC resource tag. I think it might be contains_DSC resource. And then if you do a search, so we added a new command called find DSC resource that lets you search for specific DSC resources as opposed to modules. And find DSC resource will automatically search using that tag. So it will only look at modules that have DSC resources, and it'll actually look for another tag that tells you what the name of those DSC resources are.
That is awesome. So yeah, I don't have that command on my system yet, so I think I'm going to have to reboot before that one shows up. So, so will this allow you to have the DSC resources placed where they need to be on a pull server, or is there going to be some other process after someone does, a find or an install DSC resource?
So that's a good question. I don't think our story is quite complete there yet in terms of integration between the pull server and PowerShell Git. I mean, you can see how it would work really well if you could use your own NuGet gallery as a pull server location or something like that. I don't think that's quite in place at this point in time. I'm not sure what we've actually released.
Okay.
Right now.
Yeah, that was. I'll go ahead and credit Rob in the chat room with asking that question. But yeah, he's talking about how you've got to have the the zip file, and it has to be in a certain folder and so forth. So obviously somebody could
named with the version number, and it's got to have its checksum file with it, and
yeah. So it's kind of a pain right now. Yeah, there's a bunch of work being done on the pull server right now. Again, I'm just not quite sure.
Theoretically, someone with scripting skills should be able to put that together.
Absolutely.
In theory. Yeah, that was my point. Is that this is not an impossible task, but the question of whether it is in there today or not is that's what I just want to understand, so that everybody knows what will be left.
Have there been any updates to the compliance server in WMF5?
Jeffrey, do you know?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, we I think we renamed it to the reporting server, so that's a little bit more accurate. And actually, I'm not sure what we've done with that in this release.
Okay.
So, no, I'm not.
I'll have to do some
That's
research.
a great question.
Because I know in the current version, you can get data back on the current state of your nodes and like the last time they checked in, and if what GUID they're using to pull their configuration and whether or not they're compliant. But that's kind of it, at least in version 4.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't know the answer.
I have another question, and this is something that I was watching the videos from the PowerShell Summit in Europe, and during one of your talks, or it may have been a Q&A, you had mentioned that, well, today, right, version 4 DSC, kind of the way it works on the node is there's those 2 scheduled tasks that run periodically that, hit those WMI methods, the SIM methods.
Yep.
And I heard you say that is a temporary thing. Is that,
Yep.
That's what you said? Okay, can you talk about that at all, or is that not something you can talk about?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember whether we pulled the trigger and put that code into this release or not. But basically, we're replacing that with something called AJE, the Automation Job Engine. So this is a really quite sophisticated piece of native code. And what it does is it replaces the job scheduler tasks with an NT service that monitors the jobs. And one of the kind of key things that it does is that often you'll do a DSC task and you'll say, oh well, that's going to have to do a reboot. And maybe it actually has to do a couple reboots before you've finally converged the system.
Yes.
Well, the automatic job engine, what it's designed to do is to be able to pick up and reconnect the data streams. So if you had a task like that and you said start DSC configuration minus wait minus verbose, in the previous versions, you'd get verbose things right up until the time it did a reboot.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
the answer best of luck, my friend. Well, the automatic job engine is the mechanism that then will reconnect those data streams. So you'll see a pause, wait a period of time, and then it'll come up and you start getting your streams back. It's pretty amazing. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that's going to be nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm still working on trying to get this Rickroll working in PowerShell, so I'm distracted, guys. I apologize. We had this going. I swear it was on the show when we had one of the times we had Bob Reynolds on.
Yeah,
it was one click.
It was one click. Bam. Rickroll.
And it used Box Starter to install a chocolatey package, the Astley chocolatey package, which invokes Lee Holmes' script, which everybody, if you've not checked it out, you should find it, and I'll find the URL. It opens up a PowerShell console window and Rickrolls you right there in the console.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
By the way, it's one of the things I always use to point out that, hey, with these community sites, you just don't know what you're getting, right? So they have to be curated feeds, and so I'll show them that. And part of the point here is in the Chocolatey repository, Mark Rusinovich's sysinternals tools are there. And so I asked Mark, when did you put those there? When did you encode those? And he said, what are you talking about? So clearly it wasn't Mark who put them there. So maybe, when you pull those tools down, maybe they're Mark's tools and maybe they're not, or maybe they are, but they have some extra things and who knows what those are. So that's why, by default, these repositories are untrusted. So we introduced the idea of trustworthy repositories, the ones that come from Microsoft and we are standing behind. We'll trust, and then the other ones, you can decide whether you trust them or not. But in general, the idea is that corporations will set up their own repositories. They'll vet the code that they put in that, and then you trust that repository.
And to add on to that, in terms of the PowerShell gallery, I think that there are 2 key points to add on to Jeffrey. One, it is an untrusted repository. So you're prompted each time you want to download a module from the PowerShell gallery saying, hey, this is untrusted. And then 2, when you install a module using install module, we don't run any custom install script or anything like that. So when you use install module, you aren't going to get rickrolled.
Well, unless you want to be.
Well, yes. If you tried at it, you could probably make it happen.
No, it's actually it's a deferred thing until you import the module.
Yeah.
All right. So, is there anything else we need to scope out about PowerShell Get?
It's awesome. Use it.
Yeah,
it is awesome.
The big points.
Is there significance to the fact that the name OneGet does not have PowerShell? Is that going to be at some point kind of a de facto package manager for Windows? Is that the hope?
No. It's PowerShell OneGet.
Okay.
In the same way that DSC is PowerShell DSC.
All right. I guess I've just seen it referred to as OneGet.
Yeah, no, it's PowerShell OneGet, and then that's a little tricky in the sense that, by the way, there's a story behind that. So originally it was DSC, and then my boss in our one-on-one gave me a big whack in the head. And what the hell are you doing? What do you mean? He says, we have this wonderful thing called PowerShell. Everybody knows it. Everybody loves it. And now you're introducing this new name. Isn't it PowerShell? I said, yeah, it is. He says, well, let's call it PowerShell. So, okay. And he's right. So that's why it's PowerShell DSC.
Okay, cool.
Yep, I like it. It's a brand. Be proud of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going back to a couple of questions that there were in the chat room. Then we'll go back to other things in the November drop. So let's see. Are there any problems, conflicts with installing WMF5 with some of the other Microsoft apps like Exchange or System Center?
Yeah, I just posted those in the stream there. They're in the notes. Let's see. So it says you should not use it with System Center 2012 Configuration Manager, and don't use it with Small Business Server 2011 Standard. Those are the ones that we know have issues.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. And let's see, there were a couple of others. We talked about the pull server, which was an excellent question from Rob. Thank you, Rob.
You should be asking about ISE, man. Have you been kicking the tires on this thing?
Well, see, I have the same problem you do in that I don't remember what was released versus what was not released. So I didn't want to prompt you.
Well, I'm using the latest technical preview. I'm using the latest technical preview, and I use the ISE every day. What's new? What's awesome?
Okay, well, first is now when you do remoting, you can PS edit a remote file. So you there, like say you go to a headless server, and you're dirring around, and you can now just say PS edit foo.txt or foo.ps1, and we bring that file locally. We tell you it's a remote file, and then party on. Just start edit it. Better still. So now this one has a few little glitches and gotchas, but imagine now that you're on a client machine and you do an enter PS session to some remote server. Now remember how in the past show command stopped working? You just couldn't do show command on the remote machine? Yes. Now show command works, and it shows you the commands on that remote machine. And
wow,
in fact,
that's pretty.
And that works down level too, because the way we implemented that is we have this new command. It's show serialized command. Get command by get serialized command. Get command by itself generated too much data. Anyway, so it's get serialized command. And what will happen is we connect to the remote machine and we see, hey, does that thing have that command? And if so, we run it. And if not, we squirt it across the wire into the session because it's a script commandlet. And so that's why it works on down-level systems. Now we have some gotchas there with restricted run spaces, but if you configure your restricted run space to include this get serialized command, it works.
So let's see. Going into now, there's debugging as well, isn't there?
Yep. Yeah. Paul Higginbotham's been doing some great magic stuff. Say again?
This works like magic.
It just works.
Like I don't understand that. I mean, okay, so debugging something locally, that one makes sense to me. Debugging remotely, it makes sense to me, but just like the concept of you're going out to a remote process and attaching to it in real time and watching what it's doing and being able to stop it and inspect everything just like you can do with a debugger. But it's not just to remote things, but it's also to be with local things that didn't previously have, kind of like that headless situation.
Like jobs?
Like jobs.
Yep.
Oh,
exactly.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. And remote workflows, it's a wonderful stuff. Paul Higginbotham had done that. In fact, he's the guy. So the way this worked is he was doing that. And obviously, when you set a breakpoint in a remote machine, you have to see the code, right? And so he had done this code that did that. And I'm looking at that. I'm like, hey, Paul, well, if you can do that, why can't you do editing? Like, why can't you then just do a set? And he said, yeah, you could do that. And so that's how we got remote editing. And by the way, you should have him on and have him talk about the code or show the code. He uses just this amazingly just this brilliant insight into how we can use the mechanisms that are already there to do this extraordinarily powerful thing. That was what was so amazing. When I first saw it, I thought, okay, great systems programmer, wrote a bunch of code. That's what we do. And then it's like, and I'm like, oh, wait, you modified the protocol. We're going to have to go update the protocol documentation. So that's a great feature, but goddamn, every time we have to update the protocol docs, that's a pain in the butt. And he says, no, I didn't update the protocol. I said, well, how'd you do it? And basically, he's using a remote event subscription to do this stuff. It's brilliant. You should have him discuss it.
Okay. And as an additional note, he is doing a set of blogs on the PowerShell team blog about this feature set over the next couple of weeks. I think he's just released the first one recently. So if you're interested in it before he gets on the podcast, you might be able to get a sneak peek.
Oh, you know what? I'll talk to him about having him write the details. Do a really chewy blog. Most people won't like it, but you guys will love it, and you'll go into all the details.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
It really is.
Yeah, well, we don't care about the other people. Let's see. So I can't tell by looking at the blog if which of them are Paul's because they're all signed by PowerShell team. But yeah, we will find that. If there's a link in there, we will find it and put it on the show notes.
Yeah, and have we talked about security?
Not yet. Let's do that now.
Mr. Lee Holmes, man, you got to have him on and talk about security. You would not believe the stuff that guy's doing. It's just fantastic. So first, it kind of starts with, I don't know if you've been paying attention, but the bad guys just love PowerShell, right? And of course,
yes, they do.
They have exquisite taste in technology. I mean, just truly refined, discerning taste. But the reality is that, one, I'm sort of not joking, PowerShell is very powerful, and these are really, great hackers in the good sense of the word that appreciate the power of PowerShell. But there's another thing. That's why, by the way, bad guys and the security researchers love it. But the reason why the bad guys love it is that there's a particular way of using PowerShell where certain things don't get logged. And so it provides the bad guys a set of operational security that allows them to go do stuff and not be detected. Well, that's until they encountered a guy named Lee Holmes, who is just kicking butt on this. So basically, he's gone and now closed the logging loop. We have fantastic logging. So I don't know if you attended Matt Graber's talk about how the bad guys have these iterations where they bring something down and they decode it, and then that brings something down and decodes it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lee's logging catches all of that. and brings the full, spotlight on those sort of activities. The other thing he did was he modified the transcript. Remember transcripts? Transcripts are awesome, but they also sucked. They sucked because they only worked in the console.
Right.
And so, I always wanted them in the PowerShell ISE because I then, give a talk in ISE, and I wanted to then share the transcript afterwards. Well, now you can do it. So in the past, it was a hardwired feature to the console API. Now it's a general purpose engine function, which can work with any host.
Nice.
And when he did that, it now also works nested, so you can have one transcript and then start another and then another, and when you stop transcript, it stops the inner one, and then stop it again, stops the outer one, etc. But now here's the key. He has it so that you can have a security policy which says, I want to do a transcript, a system-level transcript, on every PowerShell session, whether you as a user ask for it or not.
Nice.
And then that gets stored in a system folder. So just some fantastic stuff there. Then kind of lastly, again, back in the area of logging, he's done it so that now you can, he's got a set of library functions and scripts to be able to do cryptographic encoding of text files, of files. So this is the CMS commands. And then what you can do is you can now encrypt your logs, your PowerShell logs. So imagine the case that you're doing some stuff and a bad guy's on the system. He might want to take a look at your PowerShell logs to find out other information about what machines are out there, or where the interesting files are, or did you use like a command, a native executable where you passed in a password. All those things, are in the logs. Well, with what we're able to now do is we can encrypt the logs and then forward them off to a machine where they then get decrypted with the private key. So some really just fantastic stuff in security.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, and you know what? There's more stuff he's done, but I don't know that that's public, so I'm not going to talk about it. But you should definitely have Lee on. This has been, a great release for Lee.
We will definitely do that. Paul and Lee.
Yeah.
Awesome. So now there was a note in the chat room here. Are we sure if does transcripting work with the output of executables?
I could write some code.
Maybe that's something to we can dive into that.
Start. Which executables?
I don't know, Keith. Which executable? It's Keith's fault that I asked that. While we're thinking about that, there was another question in the chat room that I wanted to be sure to mention because I wasn't the phrase was an interesting one that I'd not really used before, but it makes sense now. So here's a question. Found it. Is Microsoft using WMF5 in the cloud platform system?
Yes. I don't know what that means, but sure, why not?
I don't either. No. Does that mean it's in Azure?
Yes, so indeed, I mentioned to you there's so many things going on. It's just being used everywhere. One of the places it's being used is in Azure. Of course, all of the Azure commands. We just had a cloud summit today where Rasinovich got up there and was telling everybody in the company, hey, here's what we're doing with Azure, here's what the future is. And he just, new service after new service after new service talked about it does this, and it's got PowerShell support. It does this, and it's got PowerShell support. We're doing this, and it's got PowerShell support. And he's like, basically, everything has PowerShell support. And then one of the things that we did, again, in this very agile way, Azure has VMs, and they have these guest extensions. So they provided this guest extension mechanism, and this was demonstrated first at Build, where they showed Chef and Puppet as VM extension agents. Turns out that as they talked with those guys and set that up, it was a really kind of heavy burden on them. And so then somebody, somebody said, oh, well, we really want to support, we want Octopus support as an extension agent. And so they came to us and said, hey, could you guys write a DSC extension agent? And then from now on, as people want to write new extension agents, we'll just have them do it as DSC provider, DSC resources, and do it that way. So from that request, within a matter of, I don't know, maybe 8 weeks from like request to shipping, it took us. I mean, we just moved really, really quickly. And so now DSC is integrated into Azure. It was first done through the portal, and now it's getting integrated into the GUIs. And when it comes in, it's an extension agent. It brings in the latest Windows Management Framework.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy cool. Crazy cool.
Very neat. So there's nothing you can't do with PowerShell. That's what we learned today, especially in Azure.
I want to hear. So, can we talk about what's new in DSC yet? I've been doing.
Sure.
I've been doing very little, but DSC for like the last 9 months. So
Jonathan, did you see the 3 pages of notes that I sent you from the MVP Summit?
Yes.
Okay. So you should know what's new in DSC because I took notes for you specifically.
I appreciate that very much. But for the benefit of the rest of us.
Yeah. By the way, before we get to DSC, I'll just say that Keith confirmed that indeed Start Transcript does capture XE output. Previous versions it did. Which is a great example, of, hey, as we move fast, sometimes we're going to have these issues, but if you tell us about it, we're able to respond to them quickly. So there you go. So DSC, I'd say that there's just a gazillion things in DSC going on. Let me tell you about some of my favorite ones. They're really kind of 3 that I want to highlight. So the first is the notion of partial configurations.
Okay.
So in the past, a configuration was, there was a sole provider of the configuration. Now we can configure the setup, DSC, to say you can get configuration information from multiple sources. You can get, you might have somebody in charge of the base OS configuration, and then someone else in charge of, say, security configuration, and then a third group that then is going to do, say, application configuration. And what will happen is we'll get this configuration from the various sources at a schedule. We'll combine them, detect any conflicts. You have to resolve the conflicts. We don't resolve the conflicts. And then make it so. Now, if it turns out that you guys can't resolve the conflicts, then what you can do is you can go into LCM and say, hey, this person has exclusive control over these resources. So this configuration source has exclusive control over these configuration resources. And then from then on, if there's anybody who wants to change that, they got to go talk to that configuration source. So that's a big thing. And then the next is
that's driven by LCM. So you can specify multiple configuration sources.
Exactly correct.
For a single node. Okay.
Yep. Exactly correct. And then one of my favorites is now we have this get DSC configuration status. Okay, and so what that does is you run it and you say -all, and it will tell you the status of, well, if you just run it, it tells you the last status. If you say -all, it gives you the status of all the previous runs. And so it tells you things like, well, what was run and why did I run it? But most importantly, or most coolly, it tells you which resources were in compliance, and it tells you which resources were not in compliance.
Timestamp?
So, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. It's awesome. Now it's going to get even better. Again, this falls into the category of desires but no commitments. Right now it tells you these resources were not in compliance. We want to get down to the property level to say these properties of these resources were not in compliance.
Okay, yeah.
How's that?
That would be phenomenal.
And then, of course, I saved the best for last. right? Now, by the way, there's a gazillion things going on in DSC, right? So just each area, there's just really great stuff. But these are the kind of three that really pop for me because, anyway, so the biggest is classes. So now you can write DSC providers in classes. Now, in the previous September release, you could do that as well. But honestly, we released that probably 2 weeks before we should have. Because if classes worked, you were fine. But if it wasn't quite right and you tried to iterate, we had some issues about reloading and such, so you might have seen some instability. 2 weeks after we shipped it, it was just fine. Anyway, in the November release, that's very solid. And the semantics are defined around, basically we use $this to within the methods to refer to both properties and methods. So we've settled on that semantic. So basically you're good to go with the classes. Now again, we have classes is a very large subject, and we are using the use cases of desired state configuration to prioritize the features that we implement. So in the future, we'll look at things like interfaces and inheritance, but they're not there in this release. But you have full class definitions. You have attributes on the methods to declare that this is a DSC resource, what the DSC key is, things like that. And then you have methods, and of course, you now have the new language mode. This is the language mode that's more friendly to programmers, right? I think every one of us, whenever we we wrote a script that had a return statement, and then we're shocked to find out that if you did something else that called some .NET method that happened to emit an object, it would also get returned. I think that surprised and pissed everyone
that is not
off.
what you expect if you came from something like C.
Yes, exactly. Well, this is one of those things. What it is it's pure shell semantics. That's the way shells works. And if we didn't have that return statement, it would work as a shell works and everybody would understand it. But when we put that return statement in, this is one of those situations where, I think we probably made a mistake. We were trying to make it more friendly to developers, but in the end, we promised something. You add something, you make it weaker. Like, the joke there is you say, I'm loyal to my spouse. That's a very strong statement. You add the word on Tuesdays, and that does not strengthen the statement. Okay? It makes it weaker. And in the same way, adding return, we thought that was going to make it stronger. It didn't. It made it weaker because it promised something. It gave the impression of something that wasn't the case. Well, with the language mode with classes, it is the case. You have to declare your return type, and then the only thing that gets emitted is the things in the return statement. So people are going to like that a lot. Well, sorry, developers are going to like that a lot.
But also, people who are making resources are going to like it a lot too, because it's kind of simplified that process.
It really has. Resources are so much easier with classes. I got to tell you, I'm just crazy enthusiastic about what's going to happen in the PowerShell community. First is, we're really starting from a base of a critical mass of things. I mean, it really is. The adoption's great. The people who have produced resources feel great about it. More and more people are producing things. And to that, we're adding desired state configuration, which is being adopted faster than anything else. We're adding PowerShell get and one-get, and we're adding classes. And I think these three things on top of this base critical mass is just going to be like pouring jet fuel on in a good way on the fire of PowerShell. I think it's just going to be. I'm just crazy excited to see how this will work out.
And then alongside that, you're releasing DSC resource waves like crazy,
isn't it? It is.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, there's more to it than that. I will tell you, there are deep fundamental transformations going on underneath the covers that you don't see. So, part of this is, well, hey, how do you take a group that, in the previous time, did a 3-year release, and now all of a sudden you're releasing like 8 versions of the desired state configuration resource kit within a year, right? The processes have to be different. The way we're organized, the roles and responsibilities, these are all changing in really deep and fundamental ways. The very notion of who does development and how do we do development and how do we ship and where do we ship, these are all being explored, and some very creative stuff's happening. You're seeing the leading edge of that. I will tell you that there is more. It's going to be more exciting. It's going to be better. So put your seatbelt on.
Do XDSC resources automatically get added to the PowerShell Get repository?
There's no automatic to it, but that's a manual process right now.
All of them will be there as a matter of policy, right?
When we publish them up to TechNet Script Center, we also run a script that does publish module.
Okay, cool.
So it's actually a lot quicker to publish them to the PowerShell gallery, let me tell you.
I'll bet. And another thing that you mentioned at the summit that in the video I saw was that DSC or creating DSC resources is like on deck for being part of the common engineering criteria. I forget the phrase. I forget the term that you used for that.
Yeah, I don't remember the term I used, but basically what we did was when we published the common engineering criteria, you have here are the mandatory requirements, and then you have a set of things which are basically sort of like the IETF request for I forget anyway. But you say, hey, this is going to become a standard. And this is your opportunity to, try it out, kick the tires. If you have any problems, speak now or forever you hold your peace. Because if we don't hear from you, it's going to become a standard, and you're going to have to do it. So, so it's in that status.
One of the things that I thought was interesting that happened, I guess, since then, is we got a bunch of Exchange resources. But they were written by a couple of PFEs. It wasn't written by the Exchange team. So
yes.
What? that
that's
just
the most
blew my
comprehensive
mind.
thing I've ever seen.
Well, yeah, this is great. Because basically, it's people who really need it. I mean, why are these guys writing it? And the answer is they're out there in the field, and their customers need this stuff.
Yes.
So they're like, hey, I'll write it, and I'll share it. So, in reality, this is goodness, right? We shouldn't have a world where we're dependent upon the product teams to do all that work. It's like whoever has the best stuff, go, go, go.
It's just amazing to see it happening. It's such a cool time.
Isn't it?
Let's see. There was a question in the chat room, which I'll just mention briefly. Any discussion of Docker support in the near future? So I know that Microsoft's publicly said that I want to say it was on an Azure blog that y'all are working on this stuff. And I think what I was going to do, unless you have anything to add, Jeffrey, when the PM over there is ready to talk about that, we're definitely going to have him on the podcast. I've already talked to him about that. I don't know, Jeffrey, do you have anything about Docker to say?
No, I just say, I'll say it this way. Anybody doing anything with automation is doing it with PowerShell. And Docker's all about automation. So
awesome. Yeah, that actually came up. I was at a Atlanta DevOps meetup. I went for the first time. It was a very, very cool meeting. And but big part of the talk was about Docker. And he asked for questions, and I said, hey, what do you think about Microsoft, doing this and so forth? And it turned into some really good discussion. And I didn't know if I was going to get, but I did not get any sort of violent kickback. Oh my God, Microsoft is, going and polluting our open source waters, or blah blah blah. There was none of that kind of response. So I counted that as a big, huge win.
Yeah, now just to be clear, there's two conversations around Docker. So one is Docker on Linux, and we support that in Azure. But the other thing is we're supporting Docker on Windows containers. We're having Docker containers on Windows. And so that's the thing that's in development, and we're not giving too many details on that yet, but I'll tell you that's a very exciting story, and we're having deep conversations with those guys.
Yeah, I definitely want to dig into that one big when you guys are able to, because I'm excited about those kinds of technologies. So awesome.
Absolutely.
Let's see, one last question in the chat room here. Mike wants to know, will the X ever be removed from DSC resource names? Are they going to be experimental forever?
Yeah, I don't think we're ready to talk about that. So sure, the answer is yes, they'll be taken away. The question is to what? And there, I mentioned to you, there's some very creative thinking going on. This is one of those areas. Not ready to talk to you about it yet, but pretty soon we will. I think you're going to love the story.
All right, awesome. I got another one. I just remembered this was also in the chat room. People want to, and I know this because they just asked in the chat room, they want to be able to see the code and participate with Microsoft and, submit a pull request, for example. Is this something that you guys see happening with any part of PowerShell, resource kits or otherwise? And what do you think about that?
Did I mention to you that there was some really creative thinking going on and we're not ready to talk about it yet?
Related? Okay, that's related to the same question. Excellent. I will defer that.
Yeah, by the way, so have you kicked the tires on the convert from string? Do you know that? Do you know that one?
Not.
Oh, okay. Well, again, I mentioned to you, Lee's having a great release. So one of the things he's bringing in is this technology called, it's called Flash M. It was some research technology. And basically it gets away from this prayer-based parsing. So, sort of no matter what you do, there's always times where you're going to have some horrible text string that you have to parse, right?
Yes.
So we're doing a lot of event log processing. And if you, at some point, the event log has some nice structured data, and then it has this message. And like, oh, what do I do with that damn message? And the answer is bring out your regular expressions, or ipconfig, right? Still gives text. There's any number of things that still produce text. So now what we have is we have this parsing by example. Okay, so first off, this engine is sort of an AI engine, and if you just pipe a text stream to it, it basically knows about various forms of data, and will do a pretty good job of picking out how to transcode that pure text stream to an object. But alternatively, what you can do is you can run the command, put the output in a file, and then edit that file and go and put some annotations and say, hey, this is a name, this is an address, this is a zip code, and you just give one or two examples and you feed it to it, and then it looks at that and auto-generates a parser that you then use to then parse the rest of the data. So it's amazingly cool stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a situation where I can play with that.
Yeah, this looks really interesting. I just pasted a link in the show notes. The blog post is, let's see, October 31st looks like convert from string example-based text parsing. So this is chewy. I'm going to have to dig into this a little bit later.
Yeah, it's awesome. Crazy. It's one of those things you're like, oh my God, when you just like see what it does, and you're like, well, wait, could it do this? Wait, could it do that? And your top of your head explodes.
What is it? Regular expressions are a write-only language.
Exactly.
With convert from string, you can actually see the examples you've given it, and then if you need to make a fix or there's some corner case you need it to take into account,
gosh,
it's really easy to just add that corner case to your example, and then boom, it's fixed. Right? So it's more transparent to you. It's an awesome feature.
Yeah, this does look really cool. One more question. This one just came up. What's the version requirements of the current versions of WMF? As far as and there's some caveats,
so
right?
Now, yeah. So the WMF, being a preview, it is on the latest version of the OS only. Okay, so that's Windows 8.1 and Windows Server 2012 R2. we would like to expand that to go more down level to get more feedback. But again, I mentioned to you, we're making a lot of changes. Right now, that's a change that we're not able to accommodate just because of the amount of work involved, but it's something we're striving for. When we finally get out of this, what we call active branch, and say, hey, now this version is going to be a long-term version, kind of a snap, then that one will currently, the plan is to bring that down to Windows 2008 R2 and to Windows 7.
Very cool.
How's that for an answer?
I'm very glad to hear 2008 R2.
Yeah.
How about XP?
Yeah, how about that? Well, here's the deal, right? There is a version of PowerShell. I'm trying to remember what version of PowerShell runs on XP. Does it have remoting?
I think it's 2.
2. So it has remoting. So I think it does. So here's the deal, right? From 2002, you'll be able to manage, threshold, or I guess we're calling it Windows 10. I don't know what we're calling the server version, but 2000 XP will be able to manage 10, and 10 will be able to manage XP because of the protocol negotiations.
That's pretty wild,
isn't it? That's
yes.
why we don't use the .NET serializer. That's why we do our own serialization. Because from the very beginning, from an architectural standpoint, I knew that the only way we were going to achieve that, interoperability, was to own our own serialization.
Genius.
Why, thank you very much.
Okay, let's see. There were a couple of late questions just in the chat log. Everybody's on today, so we appreciate that. Jonathan, did you see this one from Rob Cannon?
I didn't.
Let's see. Here it is. Okay, found it. Is there support plan to be able to have partial configuration from a pull server only run during a certain time window, like a maintenance window?
Oh, that's a good point. Yes.
I do not know the answer to that. Wait, so what would that actually mean?
So it would mean if you were going to make a change to my server that could reboot it, I only want you to make that change during my maintenance window. Or if I'm going to make a change that's going to, take down the service, then only do it during my maintenance window. Or if I'm going to install an application, only do it during my maintenance window. And if you had partial configurations and you could specify only do these configuration tasks during the maintenance window, everything else, if it's broke, fix immediately. As soon as you can. This section of stuff, I only want you to do during the maintenance window.
Yeah. I'm going to hold off on answering that question. I can tell you what I asked them. Let me see. It doesn't have that example. Yeah, I'm going to hold off answering that. That is a scenario. Well, I'll tell you the scenario that we discussed, which is a little different.
Okay.
And that was that the different partial configuration sources should be able to have their own configuration with respect to. Well, actually, hold on a second. Let me see. Here, talk about something with John while I write some code.
Yeah, it would be nice if they were. If you could individually say, for example, this configuration I want apply and autocorrect. This configuration I want apply and notify, or I just want notify if it's out of compliance. Which sounds like it may be possible.
Talk to John about something while I write some code.
Yeah, so Jeffrey is going to go ahead and implement that feature that we're talking about and push that build out. So we're going to have another November WMF5 build. Just a little bit later tonight, right, guys?
So, John, can you talk to us about who are building the DSC resources? Is that mostly, I know, for example, the Exchange ones, those were written by PFEs, not on the PowerShell team. Are most of them written by the PowerShell team? Are you starting to get contributions from all over Microsoft? How's that working?
I would say initially they were all written by the PowerShell team. So wave 1, wave 2, that time frame, all came from us. As time has gone on, more and more and more has come from outside of the PowerShell team and across Microsoft. So PFEs, man, I'm blanking on all these acronyms that are in my head. But so I would say there's no way that our team could have scaled to release 40 resources in like 1 month. So yes, it's mostly coming from outside the team at this point. That isn't to say that we aren't involved in the release of them. Just we aren't authoring, and we're more coordinating, I would say, at this point than authoring.
Were you expecting that to happen when you started releasing these waves?
I would say we hoped that would happen. Jeffrey probably knows more about expecting than I do.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so I'm done, right? I'm done trying to write the code. It's going to take more than that. Anyway, so I don't know the answer. What was the question you asked?
I believe the question was...
were you expecting for, like, since the first couple of waves, you've had resources written by people outside of the PowerShell team. Were you expecting that to happen? Or is that just like a happy thing that happened after that where you're getting more and more support from other areas of the company?
Yeah, it's actually a mixture. So basically, we were working with some of those people. We reached out, like we're working with the ALM Rangers, and enlisted them to write some. And we worked with what's called the Customer Advisory Team or whatever to write some, and then other people came to us. So, yeah, it's been a mixture. It's been just fantastic.
That's very cool.
All right, last question, guys, unless another one shows up that I really like a lot more in the next 20 seconds. So last call. So Microsoft has done a lot of really cool public things and changes of stance, really, regarding open source lately. The latest big announcement was the .NET framework, a whole lot of changes over on that side. What do you see from the PowerShell team? And I think I know what you're going to say because we kind of touched on this a little bit. But what about PowerShell being open source or running on other platforms directly, kind of like how you see Mono does? Some of these possibilities that people think about when they see what the...
Yeah, so they're really two separate questions. One is the area of open source, and the second is running on Linux. They're really different issues. And at the last PowerShell Summit, the last two PowerShell Summits, I predicted that, and this is predicted versus promised or planned, I predicted that both of those things would happen with PowerShell. And since then, I've become more and more convinced that both of those will happen. So let me then break down some of the issues. Each time somebody open sources something at PowerShell, it becomes easier for the next group to do. We are a Windows component, and so Windows components are really, there's quite a big barrier between a Windows component and everybody else. Windows is special in a way that's just different than everybody else. So we're going to be one of the hardest groups to be able to do some of that. But nevertheless, I believe that it's inevitable that will occur. Just don't hold your breath. Now then, Linux is a separate conversation. So Linux, the fact that the .NET team made things available on Linux was just huge for us. For us to try and do that prior to that would have been very, very difficult. Now, it's important to understand what the .NET team did. What they did was they took the new version of the core CLR and the core frameworks that run on the core CLR there to Linux. Okay, so this is sort of the next generation. So if you remember, the core CLR is the version that's side by side, and the frameworks around that are refactored frameworks. They're not the older versions where everything's available. Okay, this is the very small, very fast, very lightweight components that are more oriented towards server application models. So what that means is that PowerShell, what we're going to have to first do is to get a version of PowerShell that runs on the core CLR on Windows. And then when we do that, what you're going to find is that a number of things that are available on PowerShell will not be available in that version. So I can just give you a very quick one. The way they deal with SQL and databases is very different. So there's no data table class, and therefore the data table object adapter is just not going to be a possibility in that environment. That's a small example. There's quite a few things like that. So a core CLR version of PowerShell is the first step, and it will be have reduced capabilities. Then you take that and make that available on Linux. And when you go to Linux, then a new set of things apply. How do you integrate into that environment? How do you do the remoting? We have about 5,000 lines of native code that we'd need to rewrite for a Linux environment. So you might have guessed by the term 5,000 lines of code that we've looked into this a little bit. But I'm optimistic at some point these things will happen. Again, I'd say that the thing you need to understand is as many things are moving, happening, our primary focus is on establishing desired state communication, DSC, as the distributed heterogeneous platform, configuration management platform, because that's the thing that I really need to get nailed, and anything that distracts me from that just hurts. So until I get that nailed, all these other things are much lower priority.
Awesome.
How's that for an answer?
It's a long answer, but I think everybody appreciates the detail. The short version is yes, eventually.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, you
Very
should
good.
give me a budget when you ask a question. Jeffrey, answer this question in 20 seconds or less.
Nah, that's no fun. All right, I think we've just got one more question then. And John, you get to go first.
All right.
John, are you ready?
I think so.
Hold on, let me switch over to my tab where I'm watching your face. Okay. John Slack. This is a question that we ask everybody who comes on the podcast, okay? If you could be a superhero or have a superpower, what would it be and why?
Oh, man. I'm pretty hungry right now. So I would just be able to magic food to appear in front of me at any time.
Nice. That's a new one, Jonathan.
Yes, it is.
Magic food production.
Food man.
Dude, solving world hunger.
Or at least
I don't
John
know
Hunger.
John Hunger, that's what I heard. I didn't hear
at minimum,
World Hunger.
John Hunger.
Cloudy with a chance of meatballs, man.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's a good one. Okay, magic food production. That's a good one. All right, hey Jonathan, what do we do with Mr. Snover? He's been on here too many times.
I think I know the question. Hopefully we haven't asked this one. Where do you like to go for vacation?
Oh man, that's easy. Turks and Caicos, my favorite place in the world. A lot of people go to Hawaii, went to Hawaii. It's freaking cold in Hawaii, no matter what people tell you. It's cold. Turks and Caicos, it's warm. The water is unbelievable. You see these pictures of the Caribbean? That's not Photoshop. It really looks that way. By the way, if you take a look at those pictures, a bunch of them are my wife's. We were at the... Did I tell you, sir? We're looking, and my wife's like, that picture's familiar. It was hers. And then we're in the airport. I'm sad. I was like, oh, I'm sad. There's this big picture of Turks and Caicos. I'm like, I'm going to miss it so much. Those look familiar. Well, them must have been here when I was here before. And they weren't. They were her photos. Anyway, so Turks and Caicos, by far.
Wow. How big is that island?
Not small, not big.
Okay.
You know, you drive from one end to the other within half an hour, sort of thing.
Oh, that's.
But of course, you can only drive like 25 miles an hour, so that doesn't say much. How big is Turks and Caicos?
With multiple islands.
Oh,
right?
multiple islands. Oh.
Providenciales, which is the largest of the islands for the tourism business, is pretty small. I mean, it's what, 8 miles long, and it's a kind of dumbbell shape. But then Middle Caicos, North Caicos, and then Grand Turk are all other islands in this lovely little end of the Lucayan chain, which has the other islands up to the Bahamas there that are part of it. Anyway, it's very small. A boat is good. The weather is just gorgeous, and we're not there. We're here.
Yeah,
so
cold.
other than that, life is good. Anyway, I'll leave you to it.
That was awesome.
Part of the Lucayan train.
Lucayan.
Well, whatever.
I appreciate
L
the special
star
guest
chain.
spot.
Exactly. It's the L star chain.
161 square miles is the answer.
Well, okay.
Wait a second. We have two competing answers here. 238 square miles. All right. Well, it's between the two of those.
Yeah, hey, little known fact. So it was interesting when the last time we were there, we did this tour, and the guy was saying that like 5 years ago, the British sent in like the destroyers and took over the place. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, there's bad corruption, so they came in and took over, and I had no idea.
Recently?
Yeah, it was like 5 years ago.
Oh my gosh!
What? Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy.
That's kind of crazy.
And the guy was saying, the tour operator was saying, yeah, oh, you know, the governor basically was public corruption, selling land. He says, but everybody loved him. He used to come visit us. He had this big suitcase with him, and he'd meet you, and he'd give you a big hug, and he'd open up the suitcase and hand you a big wad of bills. He was great. Loved that guy. I'm like, wait, you mean like you heard this or this happened to you? He says, no, it happened to me. I said, well, what kind of money? He says, oh, he can give you $300. Holy schmoly.
Wow.
What could be wrong with that? Anyway, it's a wonderful place.
To be perfectly honest, I have never heard of those islands before. I don't know if I've just been under a rock or whatever, but
I only have because I saw pictures that Jeffrey posted on Facebook, I think the last time he was there.
Well, now I'm going to have to go read the Wikipedia article and plan a vacation.
Wow, did you see the average high and average low on that Wikipedia page? It does not change much. Wow.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
Wow.
Yeah, I can tell you if you're interested, I'll tell you the places to go. Oh, it's fantastic food, and Grace Bay is just one of the most fantastic places to be.
Very cool. All right, well, you know what? You guys have been so gracious spending so much time with us, but we really should let you go. What I wanted to do, though, is just say thanks for coming back, Jeffrey. This has been awesome. And, it's kind of like this. It was different when you guys shipped further between, but now it's like every time you do a WMF drop, we're going to have you back on.
Well, and again, what's great is that each one of the guys in the team is able to grab something and just run with it, and they're doing fantastic. So you got to bring more guys of the team in there, and maybe get some of the ALM Rangers who are people who are writing some of these resources.
Yes. So, yeah, well, we've already got started with the exchange guys. And I forget the names of some others that you introduced me to, you mentioned, but I've got them on a list.
We talked about this before, but it's worth pointing out. So why is it exploding, right? And the answer is we hit that stage where, I've talked about it before, nobody cares about your first million lines of code, right? It takes like a billion lines of code to get things in place. But then once you have that, all of a sudden you can write 500 lines of code and do something amazing. And 50 lines of code and do something amazing, and 100 lines of code and do something amazing. Well, that's where we are. And that's why you have these people getting involved, and they're doing these amazing things with this relatively small amount of code, because they're building on the years and years and years of work that we've done. And frankly, I'll take a little credit here, of the great, architectural decisions that we've made have really borne fruit. And so now people are able to do that. So that's why it's such an exciting time.
It definitely is. So, John, thanks to you as well, and best of luck in your future career at Microsoft. Straight out of college, now you're like top of the Windows world in my book, man.
I would say I'm the bottom of the Windows.
PowerShell is the top of Windows. Get it straight.
This is true.
All right, guys. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Does John stay? All right, I see 3 thumbs up so far. So, we'll let you know, John. It's looking good. Okay.
I think December's definitely penciled in for December.
Yeah, I mean, who would fire before Christmas anyway? I mean, we'll get you in through December, no problem. All right, thanks a lot, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Adios.
All right, till next time. All right, thank you, chat room. You guys were awesome.